Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're digging into something fascinating, maybe a bit invisible, behind great ciders and wines.
Yeah, that quiet beginning part.
Exactly. We're talking about the secret life of yeast before it even starts making alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission today tracks Kesser and Steen. They're working on a cider starter culture.
Right, the foundation.
And we're zeroing in on those first few hours. What's the yeast really doing during what looks like downtime? This mysterious lag phase.
Yeast's prep time, basically.
Yeah, their secret preparation.
And, it seems like nothing's happening, but honestly, this waiting game is so important for how the final cider or wine turns out.
It feels counterintuitive, right? Waiting.
Totally. But ignoring it. That's where things can go wrong before they've even properly started. It sets the stage for everything else. A lot of brewers, especially at home, kind of miss this crucial step.
Okay, that definitely grabs my attention. So what is this lag phase? Professor Hendricks told Kesser and Steen to look it up. What are we actually talking about here?
Right, so the L phase, it's basically that first window of time right after you put yeast into a new place, like Kesser and Steen's apple juice, their starter.
Okay.
And during this time, the yeast cells, they're not really multiplying yet. They're not making alcohol. They're just getting used to things.
Acclimating.
Exactly. Acclimating. It's like they're testing the waters, figuring out their new surroundings.
So what are they doing inside the cell? It looks quiet, but you're saying it's busy.
Oh, incredibly busy. Think about it. They've just moved. The sugar level, the temperature, oxygen, nutrients.
Yeah.
It's all probably different.
Big change for a tiny organism.
Huge. So they don't just jump into dividing. No, they activate all these internal processes. They're building new enzymes, fixing up their cell walls, tuning their energy systems.
Okay.
And this is really key. They're grabbing hold of oxygen.
Oxygen. I thought that was bad later on.
We'll get to that paradox.
Yeah.
But right now, at the start, they absolutely need to use it to make sterols and unsaturated fatty acids. Crucial. They're the building blocks for their cell membranes. Without strong membranes, they can't grow properly or handle stress later. So all this activity, it's prepping them for fast growth and, efficient fermentation down the line.
Wow. Okay. So much happening beneath the surface. But why is this quiet time so critical? You said it's counterintuitive. Why is waiting good?
Well, it's precisely because of all that prep work. A really solid, healthy ELG phase.
Yeah.
That leads to a much smoother, more predictable fermentation later.
Makes sense.
If the yeast in the starter gets enough time to properly adjust and build what it needs, then the growth, the alcohol production, is just more reliable.
And if you rush it,
that's when you hit problems, like that nasty sulfur smell, or fermentation that just stalls out. Often that tracks back to a rushed or stressed L-ag phase.
nobody wants that. How long does this phase usually last?
It can vary quite a bit. Could be just a few hours, could be more than a day. It really depends on how different the new home is from the old one, and frankly, how healthy the yeast was when you pitched it.
So, for Kesser and Steen trying to make great cider, what's the practical advice? How do they nail this L-ag phase?
It's about creating a welcoming environment, not a shock to the system. Give them a little bit of oxygen, some easy-to-access nutrients, keep the temperature stable and moderate.
Gentle start.
Exactly. A gentle start lets them build up their strength. Understanding and respecting this phase means they're setting the yeast up for success, ready to tackle those apple sugars and turn them into deliciousness. It's fundamental.
Okay, let's talk specifics then. Kesser and Steen's starter setup. The sources say it's pretty classic. Can you walk us through it?
Yeah, it's a really standard, solid method. First, they boil the apples.
Why boy?
It kills off any wild yeasts or bacteria hanging around on the apples. You don't want those competing with your chosen wine yeast, or worse, spoiling things.
Okay, clean slate.
Right. Then they add a little bit of salt, just a dash. That helps suppress unwanted microbes, too.
Extra security.
And sugar goes in. That gives the yeast some easy food right at the beginning, gets them going.
Makes sense.
Then, crucially, they cool the whole mixture down. Needs to be at room temperature before adding the yeast.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. Once it's cooled, then they add their wine yeast, either dry or liquid.
So they pitch the yeast into this nice prepared starter. What happens next? Does the yeast just, take over immediately?
Well, yes and no. The yeast will take over, but not instantly. It absolutely goes through that L phase first, the one we've been talking about.
Even in this perfect starter?
Yep, even there. Those cells still need time to adjust. They soak up that initial bit of oxygen. They build the stuff they need for dividing.
Sterols and fatty acids again.
You got it. Once they've done that prep work, Then they hit a rapid growth phase. They start multiplying like crazy.
And then the alcohol.
Exactly. Only after they've built up their numbers do they really switch gears to the main job, converting sugar into alcohol, CO2, and all those lovely aroma compounds we want in cider. And I really need to stress the temperature thing again. It's so important.
Right. You mentioned room temp is ideal.
Yeah. Too hot, say over 35 Celsius, like 95 Fahrenheit, you can seriously damage or even kill the yeast.
Yeah.
Just cooks them.
Yeah.
And too cold, like fridge temperature, everything just slows down to a crawl. So yeah, room temperature is a sweet spot for this initial stage.
Okay, let's circle back to oxygen, because this confuses a lot of people, myself included sometimes. We're always told, keep oxygen out during fermentation.
Right, the airlock.
Yeah. But here, for the starter, for the algae phase, you're saying it's essential. Can you unravel that? What's the deal?
It is a bit of a paradox, isn't it? It's probably one of the most critical distinctions in fermentation, I think.
So why do they need it at the start?
Okay, so in the very beginning L phase, initial contact yeast needs that bit of oxygen. The misconception is thinking oxygen is the enemy, full stop. Its role just changes.
How so?
Remember those sterols and unsaturated fatty acids, the membrane building blocks?
Yep, crucial stuff.
Well, yeast needs oxygen to synthesize those efficiently. Without oxygen at this stage, they struggle to make enough. And without enough, they can't build strong cell membranes.
Ah, so the oxygen helps them build strong skeletons, like you said.
Exactly. Strong skeletons, robust structures. It lets them multiply effectively and be resilient enough for the actual fermentation later. It's like giving them the tools they need before the big job starts.
Okay, that makes sense for the startup. Build the workforce. But then what happens? Once they've multiplied, does oxygen still help?
Nope. That's where the rule flips entirely. Once you've got a healthy population and they enter the main fermentation phase making alcohol, you want oxygen gone.
Anaerobic, right? Without air.
Precisely. Anaerobic conditions. The yeast switches its metabolism. Now, it's focused on converting sugar into energy without oxygen, and the main byproducts are ethanol, alcohol, CO2, and those flavor compounds.
And if oxygen hangs around during that main phase?
Bad news for your cider. The yeast will tend to just burn the sugar for energy, producing mostly CO2 and heat, and much less alcohol. You can also get some undesirable vinegar-like flavors.
Ah, okay. So the paradox is, oxygen is the start button, vital for building the yeast army.
Right.
But then you have to take it away so the army does the right job making alcohol, not just breathing.
You've nailed it.
Yeah.
That's why you might stir or shake a starter initially, get some air in.
Right.
But then the main fermentation happens under an airlock, sealed off from oxygen.
Okay, now for something that really threw me when I read Kesser's notes, adding cooking oil to a yeast starter.
Yeah, it sounds weird, doesn't it?
Totally weird. My first thought was, no way that'll ruin it, but apparently it's a good idea. How does oil fit into all this?
It's actually a fascinating little hack, and Kesser's intuition there is really spot on. It links directly back to those sterols and unsaturated fatty acids.
The building block skin?
Always. So we know yeast needs them, and it needs oxygen to make them easily. But in a starter, or even the main batch, oxygen is limited, right?
Especially once it gets going.
Exactly. So the yeast can sometimes struggle to produce enough of these fatty acids for optimal cell division and membrane health. It becomes a limiting factor.
Okay. So where does the oil come in?
Simple cooking oil like sunflower, olive, whatever, contains unsaturated fatty acids already.
Ah, a shortcut.
Precisely. By adding just a tiny drop, Kesser is essentially giving the yeast those crucial building blocks directly. The yeast doesn't have to expend its limited oxygen and energy making them from scratch.
Like pre-cut materials for the construction job?
Perfect analogy. And the benefits. They're pretty significant. It means the yeast cells can often divide more times before getting stressed or tired.
Leading to
a stronger, healthier overall yeast population right from the start. This translates to a more stable fermentation, less chance of it stalling halfway through.
fewer headaches for the brewer.
Definitely. And often a cleaner flavor profile in the final cider because healthy yeast produces fewer off flavors.
Any other perks? I read something about foam.
Oh yeah, that's a nice little side benefit. Oil can act as an anti-foaming agent. It breaks the surface tension, so your starter is less likely to bubble up and make a mess.
Handy. But are there downsides? You said a tiny drop. What if you add too much?
That's the critical part. The amount has to be really small. A few drops is usually plenty for a standard homebrew batch.
And too much is bad because...
If you add too much, it can form an oil slick on the surface, and that would block oxygen getting in initially and also hinder CO2 getting out later. It basically suffocates the yeast, which defeats the purpose.
Got it. So use carefully. It's a smart trick for healthier yeast and maybe less cleaning up.
Exactly. A little biohack for better fermentation.
So Kesser's thinking ahead, not just about starting, but about finishing too. What makes fermentations stop? Even if you've got a great starter, use the oil trick. Why might it just stall out? I know I've had that happen.
Oh yeah, the dreaded stalled ferment. It happens. Kesser's right to think about it. Fundamentally, yeast are living things, and they're sensitive to their environment.
So what are the main culprits?
Well, the most obvious one is simply running out of food.
Hmm.
No more sugar, no more fermentation, game over.
Makes sense. Fuel tank empty.
Right.
Uh.
But often, it stops before the sugar's all gone, and that's usually down to the yeast poisoning itself, essentially.
With its own waste.
Exactly. The accumulation of waste products becomes toxic. The big one is ethanol, the alcohol itself.
Alcohol kills yeast, but they make it.
It's another paradox. Yes, they make it, but high concentrations damage their cell membranes. Alcohol is a solvent, after all, and it messes with their internal enzymes. Eventually, it kills them or forces them into dormancy.
Are there other waste products that cause trouble?
Oh, yes. Things like organic acid, certain sulfur compounds, these also build up and add stress. And then there's CO2.
Carbon dioxide. How does that stop things?
It's a bit more indirect. The gas itself isn't super toxic in the liquid at low levels, but as CO2 dissolves, it makes the cider more acidic, lowering the pH.
Which stresses the yeast.
Right, adds another layer of stress, especially if the alcohol is already high or nutrients are low. Plus, a thick blanket of CO2 gas on top can sometimes trap other volatile waste products in the liquid, making the environment even less pleasant for the yeast.
So it stops either from starvation or from living in too much of its own toxic waste in acidic conditions.
That's the essence of it. No fuel or the environment becomes too hostile due to accumulated byproducts like alcohol and acidity. That's why good cider makers pay so much attention to yeast nutrition, temperature control, and that initial oxygen boost. It's all about building a strong yeast team that can power through to the finish line cleanly.
We've really gone deep into those initial, almost invisible steps today, all thanks to Kesser and Steen's starter experiment. It's so clear now that this eld phase isn't waiting at all,
Not at all. It's an intense training camp for the yeast.
preparing them for the main event, the actual fermentation.
And when you understand these fundamentals, the oxygen needs, the environmental factors, even little hacks like the oil trick, you really see how much careful thought goes into making something consistently delicious.
It really shows how small, early details can have huge impacts down the line.
Absolutely. The foundation matters.
So, for everyone listening, whether you're a home brewer like Kesser, maybe battling a stubborn ferment, or just fascinated by how things work, what's the big takeaway? For me, it's that the success of something complex often rests on getting those early, seemingly quiet stages just right.
The quiet moments are often the most important, which leads to a final thought for you to maybe chew on.
Okay.
Given how sensitive yeast is, how it needs just the right conditions, the right environment, the right resources to perform its job well, what does that tell us about the conditions needed for any system, or maybe even ourselves, to really thrive and do what we're meant to do?
Today, we're digging into something fascinating, maybe a bit invisible, behind great ciders and wines.